Good dawning to thee, friends, and welcome to episode 18A and V of Sonnet Sisters. I'm Jennifer, and I'm here in Edinburgh at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, ready to give you my first impressions and analysis of Shakespeare's sonnet number 18. Yes, a good dawning to you indeed, and to the busker downstairs playing, who you might hear throughout this video, and an especially good dawning to our very first supporter on Patreon, Natalie Rowe. Hello, Natalie. Thank you so much for becoming a patron. We are so happy to have you on board. And if you would like to become a patron, just go to our Patreon page, which we'll put a link for under this video. And you can get all kinds of really cool rewards there, like outtakes and extra thoughts videos, to name but a few. So yes, a good dawning to you all. In fact, I'd even see great dawning. An awesome dawning. A super awesome party time relief dawning, because this is the first sonnet that is not a procreation sonnet. Yay! Now, for those of you who have just joined us, the first 17 sonnets were all about
children, offspring,
kids,
marry and have children,
time's a ticking,
to decide to have a child, and procreate,
you better have kids,
make a child,
have a child, or within a child, basically. All 17. But not anymore. We are out of the propaganda woods. What is Sonnet 18 about? Well, to sum it up briefly, but it basically is comparing the fair lord. So this is still a fair lord sonnet, but it's not a procreation sonnet. It's comparing the fair lord to summer and saying you're as brilliant as summer. In fact, it's saying you're better than summer. You've got a better temperament. I can rely on you more. I can rely on you better than summer, because summer can change sometimes, the weather, whereas you're constant. Your sunniness and good qualities are constant, but things do change, and surprise, surprise, everything dies. However, in my words, in this poem here is giving life to you and helping you to live on forever. But don't just take my word for it. Let's check out what Will actually said. Are you ready, Lola? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Now this is a pretty famous sonnet. In fact, some would say the most famous of Shakespeare's sonnet. It gets quoted all the time. Yep. It gets quoted at weddings and in Valentine's cards and stuff like that all the time. Not to mention the various times it pops up in popular culture. It's been put to music and sung by Brian Ferry and David Gilmour, and it's even been quoted by Captain Jean-Luc Picard himself in Star Trek: The Next Generation. It's pretty popular. Everybody loves this sonnet. But why? Why is it so famous? I don't know. I don't know. But perhaps if we dive in line by line and take a deeper look at this sonnet, it will become clear. Alright. Shall I compare you to a summer's day? You are more lovely and more reliably in a better mood, or you're more reliably good. Even when there is nice weather, rough winds can shake the lovely little buds of spring, the buds of May. So even though it is May, so it's summer/springtime, there's still bad weather that can come. Actually, May was classed as summer in Shakespeare's time because they used a calendar which lags about 2 weeks behind the one that we use now. So May fell right into summer. And summer's lease or rent agreement is far too short. Summer does not last long enough, and quite often The sun, even in summer, is quite dull, dimmed, brackets probably by clouds. And everything which is good or beautiful will at some point fade and lose all of those good qualities. Well, I didn't see that coming. Either by chance or the normal course of nature. I'm not sure, and then it says untrimmed. So either I've got the meaning of that wrong, only a little bit, and it's not saying that things fade either by chance or the normal course of nature, but actually it's saying everything fades or disappears, like Lola, by Lola. Everything fades and loses their qualities, and it's only by chance or the goodness of nature, if you're lucky, that you remain untrimmed. So if you're unchanged, that's just luck. But surely the course of nature is what takes your beauty away and causes you to fade. So I'm not sure. That seems to be confusing. Just the very presence of the word untrimmed at the end of that line has somewhat confused me. Ooh, past me was so close. It actually means the opposite of what I thought that it meant. I was thinking of trimmings in terms of like when you trim a hedge or a tree, so you're removing bits from it. So to me, untrimmed meant left completely whole with nothing removed. But actually within this context, what it meant was untrimmed, like when you think of trimmings, or on a dress or a suit, you might have extra little trimmings there. So it's like decorations or adornments or ornaments. So untrimmed here actually means left without any extras, left without any adornments, without any decorations. So left quite plain, I suppose. Which then means that the line is saying that either by chance or by nature's natural changing course, you're going to be left stripped down with no decorations, no ornaments, nothing special about you, essentially. There's actually a double meaning in the word trim as well, referring to boats and sails. Trim is something that helps you remain sort of stable and to be able to change course with the wind. But I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on when I go into double meanings. Now, some people have suggested that nature's changing course refers to the menstruation cycle in a woman. So this line is saying, you, as a man, have been spared the inconstancy of a woman, and you are more reliable than a woman. Carrying on. But your everlasting summer, your everlasting beauty and goodness won't fade, nor will you ever lose your beauty or good qualities. It says at the end ost, which you would think is like owe, like owing money, but I suspect because it's spelt O-W''S-T, that the N has been omitted, like something's been omitted because there's an apostrophe, and I suspect it's an N, so I think it's supposed to be ownst. So it's the qualities that you own, is what it's saying there. So you won't lose any of the qualities that you currently own. Correct. Though there is also a play on words here, suggesting that we all owe a debt to nature for our beauty or good qualities, which are sort of traded off or paid off with death. Cheery. Nor will death be able to brag that he's taken you off into the darkness, into his shadows. This line, of course, referencing Coolio's Gangster's Paradise. Oh yeah, and the Bible, Psalm 23. I wasn't certain about this next line. When in eternal lines to time thou growst. I think that means when you get to the point of moving on to your afterlife, eternal lines to life, eternal lines to time. Yeah, I think it means when you move on to eternity, when you move on to the afterlife, that you won't be taken by death. Wait, that doesn't make sense. How can you not be taken by death if you're moving on to the afterlife? Yeah, we'll find out in the analysis. Quite right, that does not make sense. The eternal lines are actually referring to the lines of the poem themselves. Or, the lines of life. Or, like bloodlines. Or lines of descent. Like when you have children. No, wait. No, it can't be that, because this is the first sonnet that is not a procreation sonnet. What this line seems to be saying, although I'm not 100% sure, because it is still a little bit tricky, is that within these eternal lines of poetry, They will allow you to sort of keep pace with time itself, and so you will live on for as long as time exists, and you won't get left behind by time, I think. Hey, let me know what you think about that line if you have any thoughts down in the comments. But for as long as people, it says men, but I mean back then men just meant man, like people. I'm sure he's not saying that only as long as men can see, but you know, all the women can be blind. That doesn't make any sense. So I've written people. You know, men aren't everything. For as long as people can breathe or eyes can see, that's how long this poem will last. And this poem gives you life. Oh, well that's nice. Cheers, mate. Cool. Well, that all seemed pretty straightforward, but there is more to this sonnet than meets the eye. Complexion in line number 6 actually referred to somebody's mood as well as to their sort of outward appearance or their face, much in the same way that the word temperament refers to somebody's mood as well as referring to the weather. Now, I already mentioned a little bit about the double meaning of the word untrimmed in line 8, but just to go into that a little bit further, as I said, an untrimmed sail on a boat means that the boat can't sort of change course with the wind as the wind changes. So you kind of get a little bit stuck. This then creates potentially an oxymoronic line, because then it's saying by nature's changing course, unchanging. So you're like, what, nature is changeable, but then this person's not changeable? I don't think it is oxymoronic. What I personally think about this line is that it's saying that most fair people or things sort of remain stuck and are not able to change along with nature as nature goes off on its way here and there and everywhere, managing to exist forever. Most fair things or people get stuck on Earth and eventually die, so they're not able to change with nature's changing course. That then for me makes much more sense of line 12, which previously I was a little bit confused by. So the idea with line 12 then means that you're not getting left behind by time, and you're not going to decay. You can move along with time as it goes forwards. So you'll continue to grow in the same way that time grows and moves along. You're not going to decay like everything else, which is unable to change that feature about themselves. I also talked before a little bit about the fact that ost in line 10 can mean both own and owe. So the beauty that you own and the beauty that you owe to nature. But there is also a double meaning in the word fair within that line. Because yes, it can mean the beauty, like I say, the beauty that you either own or owe to nature, but it can also mean fare as in the money that you have to pay, like a bus fare. So that supports that idea of that you have to pay back your beauty at the end of your life with death. Dun, dun, dun. And that bit of wordplay, that double meaning, only really works when you read it out loud, because when it's written down, it just has the one meaning of F-A-I-R, which would be the beauty, because fare, like a bus fare, is F-A-R-E. So that's one that really works when it's spoken. Now, it is really interesting to me that this sonnet is seen as one of the most romantic sonnets, and it gets quoted at weddings and stuff like that all the time, because when you actually take a closer look at it, it's far more of a brag poem than it is a poem declaring love for somebody very special. And this all becomes very clear when you start to look at the structure. We know that a rhyming couplet at the end of a sonnet generally tends to sum everything up and tell us what the whole sonnet was about in those two little rhyming lines at the end. And when we look at the rhyming couplet in this sonnet, it's not saying, which is what many people think this poem is about, it is actually saying, so it seems like the whole point of this poem that's being summed up is that Shakespeare's poetry is going to last forever. I mean, sure, he was right. Now, for a poem that is supposedly immortalizing somebody very special for eternity within some poetry, we really don't know very much about the subject at all. The only things we do know are that this person has a better mood and is more reliable than summer, and that they're like quite nice to look at. But we have no idea what it is about their personality that makes them so great compared to summer and in such a great mood, nor do we know anything about them aesthetically. We don't know anything about their appearance except the fact that they're nice to look at. We don't know why they're nice to look at. We know nothing about them whatsoever. So despite the fact that this poem is supposed to be immortalizing somebody very special, it could be absolutely anybody. So this idea of the sonnet being more of a brag poem than a love poem comes across even clearer when you look at the rest of the structure of the poem itself. This is a very ordered, very structured sonnet, and in fact it is so well structured that it is seen as the perfect example of a Shakespearean sonnet structurally. Let's check off that little checklist. Each line has exactly 10 syllables. There are no trockees, and the iambic meter falls exactly in the right place for every line. There's no enjambement, no running on of a thought from one line onto the next. Each line finishes as it should at the end of the line, finishing off that little bit of thought. And the rhyming couplet at the end rhymes perfectly as well. There's no near rhymes throughout the poem. They're all perfect rhymes. And that couplet at the end sums everything up in a lovely, perfect little rhyme. Now that's all fine and dandy, but where's the passion? Hey, where is it? Where's it gone? Much like, also, where is the sun gone? I don't know. It's getting dark, it's getting later. Love is not ordered, love is not structured, love doesn't make sense. It is messy, it is broken up into little bits. It is 1,000 thoughts all happening at once, thoughts and feelings and emotions, and it all feels very intense. And that actually is something that Shakespeare is brilliant at representing within his plays. You can see it really clearly, especially from The Merchant of Venice onwards. You really see him start to play with the structure of the verse and using that to show somebody's emotional state, especially if they're upset or if they're in love. He breaks stuff up and makes the verse messy to represent how they're feeling. But he has not done that with this sonnet. No. This sonnet is very structured, very ordered, very well thought out, very clever. It's not a love poem. It's a clever poem. It's a brag poem. Okay, one last thing that I want to talk about. When I first read this sonnet through, I thought, you can see here again the development from the Procreation sonnets where Shakespeare was commissioned to write these sonnets for a 17-year-old to convince him to get married. You can see how he's started to grow quite fond of this young man, of this fair lord. And here he's just going full tilt. But there are a couple of things that you have to be really careful about when looking at the sonnets. One, don't assume that you know things about Shakespeare as a person. Remember that the sonnets can be just as much a work of fiction as the plays themselves. So this sonnet could be a made-up character telling another made-up character that they are better than summer, and not necessarily Shakespeare himself telling a real-life person that they are better than summer. The point is, we just don't know which. Think of these sonnets a little bit like pop songs. That girl in Aqua didn't really believe that she was a Barbie girl, but perhaps she has felt some similar real-life emotions of wanting to be called only yours by somebody else. Or maybe you feel like William's poems are more like Adele, pouring his heart and soul out onto the page in front of all of us to see his bleeding, beating heart exaggerated up to the heights so that you feel his emotions. The point is, don't go making assumptions. 2. Just because this sonnet appears as number 18 does not mean that Shakespeare wrote it directly after number 17. The sonnets were published as an entire sequence, and there was probably quite a lot of shuffling about, putting this sonnet here and that sonnet there specifically to make the most sense of what he wanted to get out of the sequence. It doesn't mean that he wrote them in that order. So we can't go making assumptions about when he supposedly wrote each individual sonnet compared to another individual sonnet. Although you can look at where he's chosen to place the sonnet, because that might mean something. It may also be possible that the publishers themselves shimmied things about. So we still don't know if the order that we read them in today is the order that Shakespeare originally intended. In terms of performing this sonnet, I want to keep things really simple and just boil it down to the main point of this poem. So I just want to have one person telling another person that they think they're really lovely and want to keep them forever in a poem. Just that basic truth.
What was he on about? That body, mister, come figure it out with the Sonnet